Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
And we have live on our Newsmaker line this morning, Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. Sheriff Allard, thanks for calling in.
Hey, no worries, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Well, Sheriff, we talked a little bit about your department a couple times this week, and when we had on the two candidates who were running for the Steuben County Legislature, the subject of the CAP Court, the Centralized Arraignment Court, came up. And we heard about that from Democrat Randy Weaver and Republican Paul Van Castle. What can you tell us about the CAP Court, the Centralized Arraignment Court? That's when the prisoners are brought in from all the different towns and villages and cities in Steuben County and arraigned there. How's it going with that program?
Right now it's working very well, actually. After I listened to the interviews with Mr. Weaver and Mr. Van Castle, I realized that there was some information out there that probably should be clarified regarding the CAP Court. The CAP Court came about because of a 2007 lawsuit against 5 counties: Ontario, Onondaga, Schuyler, Suffolk, and Washington counties. In that, the New York ACLU sued those counties, saying that there needed to be a public defender at arraignment for anyone who's charged with a crime. And that lawsuit was settled in 2014, and those counties had to start, and then the 7th Judicial District, which we're a part of, let us know to start planning that we were also going to be held responsible to make sure that we had a public defender at every arraignment for every crime in Steuben County.
If I could stop you there, Sheriff, how did it work up until the point when you had the Centralized Arraignment Court in Bath?
So most arraignments happened without counsel up until that point in time. Most arraignments occurred in the middle of the night or during the day whenever the arresting agency presented the defendant to court, and I would say probably less than 10% had legal representation at arraignment.
Okay. And how is that going both for the suspects and for law enforcement?
Actually, we've seen a 25% reduction in remanded inmates pre-trial since the beginning of the CAP Courts. The CAP Court's been running since last March, and in that time, our jail daily population has gone down 25% with the addition of a public defender in CAP, which I guess would tell you that there were either a lot of folks that were remanded that didn't necessarily need to be, or that they're following the what's coming in January. They're following the regulations as prescribed for pretrial remand already.
Talking to Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. Well, it's interesting because we hear this from Mayor John Buckley and Police Chief Ted Murray that there's Centralized Arraignment Court trips over to Bath, and that's, I believe, is that twice a day that they do that from Hornell and other places?
So the court is in session every morning and every afternoon, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. When the initial plan came down from Rochester, from the 7th Judicial District, it was the same plan that all of our neighboring counties had, which, as you know, some are a third the size of Steuben County, some are half the size of Steuben County geographically. So when this plan came forward from the state, it was apparent that the police officers in Corning and in Hornell would be spending inordinate amounts of time in transport in order to take their defendants to the CAP Court. So what the cities did was notify the county that they were going to opt out of the plan and not be part of it, and the county would still be responsible to supply public defenders instead of at one court twice a day, at 3 courts twice a day. And along with public defenders, there would also have had to have been assistant district attorneys at 3 courts at the same time, twice a day. And in doing an analysis, a budget analysis, the district attorney and I looked at the costs of what it would cost the county, all county taxpayers, in order to supply those additional attorneys. And it became apparent rather quickly that it was going to be between $800,000 and $1 million a year in additional services to cover those 3 courts, as compared to if we instead hired more deputies to do the transports from the 2 cities, it would be about half that or less. And what we ended up with was hiring 5 deputies over a period of 2 years. We hired 2 initially, 2 6 months later, and then 1 is still to be hired in January. And we're covering the transports from both Corning and Hornell to the Cap Court so that the city police officers stay in the cities and provide public safety there. The deputies do all the transports, and when they're not engaged in transports, they're out performing public safety duties in the county so that it benefits the entire county. And in the same time, it's less than half the price would have been to supply attorneys for those 2 city courts.
Talking to Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard, learning a lot this morning, Sheriff. Now, the EMT program, EMTs, is that the same, by the way, as a paramedic?
Now, paramedic's another step higher in training and certification. You're extremely fortunate in the Hornell area to have the Hornell City Fire Department providing your emergency medical services. They do a fantastic job. It's a well-run agency that delivers emergency medical services with quite a few paramedics. I think the majority of them are paramedics. What we experience in the rest of the county is significantly different. Probably 2/3 of the county is based on volunteer ambulance corps who do a fantastic job. However, due to staffing issues, recruitment issues in the volunteer corps across the county, it's not unusual to wait 20, 30, even 40 minutes to an hour for an ambulance in parts of the county. So when we looked at that, again, I look at my role as sheriff a little bit differently. I look at it as where are we not meeting the needs of Steuben County in the public safety realm, and what can we do to affect that? So our team sat down and we looked at the issue with not only the lack of ambulances, but the lack of trained personnel to meet the needs of county residents, and decided that we would take that step and start training all of our deputies to become emergency medical technicians, EMTs, so that they could at least keep people alive until the ambulance could get there. Yeah.
And the EMT program is going well for the Sheriff's Department.
Yes, we did 13 members last year, including myself and the undersheriff. And right now we have our second class going with another 15 that will be certified in February.
Talking to Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. We had elections a couple days ago, and he wanted to come on and talk about the centralized arraignment court. Sheriff, Wendy, and I didn't tell him ahead of time we'd be talking about this, so not to surprise you here, but I wanted to get your thoughts on this Rochester issue. They voted for something called a Police Accountability Board, and my law enforcement friends who are on Facebook were voicing their opinions and many concerns about this idea. I wanted to get your thoughts on this idea of Rochester's Police Accountability Board, and considering that downstate Democrats now dominate the New York State legislature, both the state Senate and Assembly. Do you think there's a possibility of a trend of this going statewide, this Police Accountability Board? Can you envision the downstate Democrats enforcing this statewide? And your thoughts on this idea of civilian or citizen review panels of police officers?
So there's a lot of issues there. I'm all about involving the citizens in what we do in law enforcement. I think at its roots, law enforcement exists as a service to the public. And if there's a disconnect between what the public expects and what law enforcement is providing, then we have a big problem that we need to overcome. I'm not sure that this plan in Rochester is going to meet that need, but there's definitely a disconnect up there between what a certain segment of the population views as the role of the police and what they're actually receiving. I believe that it's incredibly important to involve the public in what the police do, and that's why we've done citizen police academies. That's why we do all of the classes we do, and that's why, frankly, when I hired Under Sheriff McNellis, the first round of interviews was primarily civilians on the interview panel, because to me it was important to get the stakeholders' view of what the undersheriff should be doing. Having said that, I think that anytime you have someone who is looking at the disciplinary actions of a police officer and looking at whether or not a police officer acted properly or improperly, especially in emergency circumstances, I think that the person making that determination has to have tremendous training and tremendous understanding of what it is to be a police officer and what it is to be able to have to make those decisions, those split-second, life-changing decisions. And my fear is that this board will not have the correct training, understanding, or knowledge needed to make those decisions regarding the actions of the police officers of the Rochester City Police Department. As far as the downstate members of our legislature, I put nothing past them. We've already had a mandatory use of force policy that every agency had to adopt statewide. We now have mandatory reporting of use of force statewide that goes to a data bank in Albany, and that was just last year. And everything that I'm hearing from the New York State Sheriff's Association representatives in Albany is that the legislature looked at last year as a good start, and more of the same will be coming. So it would not surprise me to see this pushed forward. I think that citizen input is a necessary thing. Citizen oversight is a necessary thing, as we have through our legislatures. However, directly impacting and deciding on disciplinary actions of police officers without the knowledge, training, and experience needed to make those decisions, I think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I watch Blue Bloods every week, and I read newscasts with stories about what police do, but I hardly think that would make me an expert on a disciplinary board, and I would hardly feel comfortable doing that kind of work myself, police disciplinary action, and outside of being a nurse or doctor at the ER, where they see a lot of law enforcement because of DWIs and things like that, I don't know who would be qualified job-wise to come in and judge the police.
Right, and it's the day-to-day complaints. Most of your complaints that you receive are that the police officer was mean, they were disrespectful, they usurped their authority in that they exceeded, constitutional ability to search, or they exceeded the power of arrest, and all of those things. Other than the general courtesy complaints, those are all very technical and depend very much on recent case law. And if you're not up to date on those decisions that come out of the appellate court and out of the federal district courts, you really have no business sitting in judgment. I think they should have input, absolutely. And that brings me to another topic. That's why I'm so much in favor of car cams and body cams.
Yes, I wanted to talk about that. Go ahead, Sheriff.
I've seen so many personnel complaints become non-complaints once the video is viewed. Because here's what happens, and we see this in training often. We perceive things a certain way, and we perceive things in the way that we expect them to occur. And I've seen this in training over and over again, where someone will perform an action and they will not believe they performed that action until you show it to them on videotape. It's not that they're lying to you. It's just that's not the way they remember it. That's not the way their brain was prepared to record that incident. And when they see the video, they say, holy cow, that I don't remember it happening that way. And the answer is, you're right. You probably don't remember it happening that way. And it's not that they're lying or making things up. It's just that they were prepared to perceive it in a specific way. And when they see the video and see what actually did occur, a lot of times folks are embarrassed that they even complain.
That's very interesting. Talking to Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. Going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with the sheriff. Stay with us.
Selecting a nursing home for a loved one isn't easy until you've discovered Hornell Gardens Nursing and Rehabilitation. Hornell Gardens delivers the highest level of care, compassion, and commitment with amenities and activities that will enrich body, mind, and spirit. It's a place that's close to home. Stop in for a tour of Hornell Gardens, located at 434 Monroe Avenue in Hornell, or to learn more, call 585-222-CARE or visit hurlbutcare.com.
Checking in now with meteorologist Rob Carroll, who says it looks like winter.
And unfortunately, we've got colder air flooding down from the north, watching temperatures off to our northwest go down. Brian, they've even started to fall around here. We started earlier this morning at around 40 to 42. And temperatures, they're going to be slipping back through the 30s. It's already starting to change over to snow up in Buffalo, and it's been snowing all morning long in Toronto, and that's where our weather's headed from. Looks like any rain showers across the area, Brian, will change to eventually some snow showers and light snow at times. Temperatures falling from the 40s into the 30s. An inch or two may fall, especially on some of the grass on some of the higher hilltops around the region, because those areas will change over first. Looks like any snow should end during the evening, and we're down at 20 to 25. Sunrise this morning was at 6:52. The sun's going to set tonight at 4:56. Now, tomorrow we'll have a cold day. High pressure, which is producing temperatures right now in the single digits in the Dakotas, heads our way. Clouds, some sun, breezy, and only 30 to 35 tomorrow afternoon. That's more suited for December than November. Partly cloudy, down close to 20 tomorrow night. A few teens are possible. Looking ahead to Saturday, partly sunny, 35 to 40. Cloudy, windy, milder for Sunday. But we pay a price for those milder temperatures, and that could be some afternoon and evening showers on Sunday. Brian?
Thank you, Rob. Carolyn back with Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. Next question, the drug issues in Steuben County. What's the latest there, Sheriff?
Well, as you saw, we did a big roundup not too long ago, primarily Wayland, Bath, and Corning areas, with indictments from investigations that had happened over a 6-month period. And we're doing a fantastic job, all the agencies working together and making that happen. My concern is after January 1st, what that's going to look like with the changes in pretrial, the bail reform, as far as being able to conduct investigations with discovery in place where all witnesses have to be named within 15 days and with not only their names but also addresses and contact information, and all of that going on, how much that's going to hamper our ability to conduct these discrete investigations that we use in our drug enforcement efforts. I think we've seen a slight downtick in overdoses, I'm happy to say, because of the efforts everyone's put forward on all ranges, or on the entire range, not only enforcement but education, treatment, prevention. We've been holding our community impact panels here at the Sheriff's Office for those first-time convictions of low-level drug use, where they meet with an addiction counselor. We talk about the science of addiction, and we make sure that they have the resources necessary to continue recovery. And we do so in the jail also. And that's another issue with this with the reform is that a lot of these folks that are sent and remanded to the jail pretrial that receive our addiction treatment in the jail are no longer going to be available to receive that, because there's not going to be pretrial remanding by the judges by law. So therefore, all of these folks that would take that opportunity to get clean, begin addiction recovery, are no longer going to be in the jail to receive that. They're going to continue to be released, turn back out into society to continue their addiction. And I see that as an enormous detriment to the efforts we've been making here in Steuben County to try and help that segment of the population.
Down to the last couple of minutes, Sheriff, on that topic you just brought up, it sometimes happens in the addiction world that a person is arrested, released, and then gets arrested again very quickly. Am I correct there? And your thoughts on that after January?
Well, after January, it's going to be a revolving door. They're going to get arrested and released. By law, part of this alleged reform is that any section of penal law, Section 220, which is all to do with controlled substances and sales, must be released. Must be. The judges can't remand them. If it's a E-felony or below, we have to release them on appearance ticket. And even if it's a B felony or a C felony or a D felony that the judges are arraigning them for, they have to release them. They cannot remand them outside of any other qualification that makes it that they can remand. But basically, it's in the law that anything under Section 220 of the penal law has to be released except for an A1 felony trafficking, which is an enormous amount of drugs being moved. So that's going to impact our ability to not only disrupt that cycle of sales, but also disrupt the cycle of addiction.
Lots to think about. We've learned a lot this morning. With that, we have to leave it. Sheriff Jim Allard, Steuben County Sheriff, I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Anytime, Brian. I appreciate appreciate the opportunity to get some of this information out and let people know what we're doing at the county level, and also that we still live in the best county in the United States of America, in my opinion.
Hey, that's great. Thank you so much, Sheriff.
All right. Take care, Brian.
Thanks a lot.